Shawty bad, slim, thick. She might drug, she might fix. And I'm all up in her
Episode
mix.
10.
Mixing with
I
the
can't believe I'm
mix.
here still doing this. How are you doing, Mr. Detective Jason White?
I'm good. Nat Cash, one of my favorite DJs in this city.
In all the land. Thank you for my cup.
My pleasure.
So this cup, it says, I see dead people. It also says Detective Jason White, Homicide.
Yeah, they're very limited. Not
They
sold
are?
in stores. No.
Did you get this made? Did you make this yourself? Who
I
drew
did.
this?
Actually, that drawing is a fellow crisis negotiator. When I was actually on the SWAT team, I was a crisis negotiator for a little over 10 years, and he was sitting over there. He's one of those that just sketches you.
Yeah? A caricature.
A caricature.
Yes.
And so he did that, and I thought that was really neat. And so we ended up putting it, my parents actually put it on coffee cups. And what I did originally is I used to hand those coffee cups out to cops when they did something really cool on one of my cases. They really helped me out and stuff, and just to kind of motivate them. But since then, I give them out when I'm teaching across the country and just to special people. So you're a special person.
I feel special.
Good.
I do feel special being
Good.
your friend. I feel like I've known you for a long time. We've done several things together. Yep. So tell me, are you still, or is First 48, is it still happening? I mean, I see episodes of it all the time, but I'm like, is this new or old?
It is still here. They've been here since July of 2014.
That's crazy.
We've had the most episodes in the history of the show.
I don't know if that's a brag or...
Well, I think really what it comes down to is it comes down to the people that are here, because each episode that you see, the family has to actually approve for their loved one's case to be aired.
Really?
Yeah. And so I think that based on where we're located, I think a lot more families here are more willing to to share their loved one with the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
And that's pretty. It's good for us too, because I think it showcases our investigative abilities, and it's just a good thing all the way around.
What's the percentage for Tulsa homicides?
Well, to give you the numbers, roughly we've had about 590 homicides since 2016, and out of those we've solved them all with the exception of 29.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
So what is the process? So, something horrible happens, a murder happens overnight, let's say. Mm-hmm. And do you guys really go in order of next person in line?
Yeah.
And
yeah, and actually the percentage of that is 95% clearance,
wow.
which is, if it's not the best in the country, it's really close. I mean, that's a lot. As far as how it works is we've got 10 homicide detectives that are in the office, and you just go in order. And so regardless of what it is, I mean, it could be, you might get a triple, you might get a single homicide, you may get one that's really looking to be difficult, which is the one that I kind of got today.
yeah. What's funny is I get a text from last night. I asked him, I said, hey, Jason, will you be on my podcast? He said, absolutely. But I got to tell you this, I'm next up for the next murder.
Right.
So, and I did get a text this morning. I thought, no way.
Well, it wasn't that I got called out on this deal, but it was things were happening and I needed to deal with it and stuff. And I didn't want to disappear at a crucial time kind of deal.
How do you stay, like, you're the most normal guy. Like, how do you do it? Like, mentally, that has got to be take a toll.
Remember when we first met, you were like, man, I didn't know if I'd like you or something. Remember that?
I love you, man.
I try, and likewise, I try to be, listen, I've been doing this a long time. I've been a cop for a long time. I've been a cop for 26 years. And I've been in homicide for 15 plus. And I just try to, I don't love every case.
No.
Some of them, if they were like gang cases every time out of the gate, I probably wouldn't do this job. They're just too difficult.
The gang ones are?
Yeah, the gang ones are difficult. You get a lot less cooperation from people involved, both on the victim side and from
people don't want to talk.
No. And it's, we don't live in that world.
Right.
So, you try to empathize with that to an extent, but it's like, it gets a little frustrating. Because, you want them to do the right thing. And ultimately, most of the time they do. But,
have you always worked in Tulsa?
Yeah, as far as a cop?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was a reserve police officer starting out in Midwest City.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was down there. I worked at Midwest City Hospital. I worked at Baptist Medical Center. I started out in the medical field, and then from there, I got into... Back then, everybody wanted to be a cop. Nowadays, nobody wants to be a police officer. But back then, it was very, very competitive. And so I happened to have an opportunity to become a reserve police officer at Midwest City in the hope that it would increase my chances on getting on a police department. And
Not getting on TV.
No, that wasn't even a thought.
That is so weird too.
And this is a long time before actually the first 48, but it is weird, but it's fun.
And now you're like a celebrity because you go around and I mean, you have a podcast now, which we got to talk about in a little bit.
Absolutely.
You're also a speaker.
I do.
How do you have time for the cases?
Well, I've been blessed to be able to speak. I've been doing that for like 9 years, and it first started where some Baltimore was interested in a case that we had done in the crisis negotiating world. And then from there, the other crisis negotiating organizations throughout this country, including Canada, they were interested. And so therefore that got that started. Mm-hmm. And then since then, usually I go somewhere exciting 3 to 5 times a year. I just got back from Virginia Beach. And like in May, I'll go to Palm Springs.
What are you speaking about? What is Detective Jason White talking about on stage?
Some of it's crisis negotiating. As far as last year, I went to Boise, Idaho. I was at a conference there. California, Palm Springs. In the past, I'll be going back, but for something different. Sometimes it's murder. Sometimes, homicide investigation. Sometimes it's crisis negotiating.
What's that mean?
Like homicide investigation?
Crisis negotiating?
Oh, well, like the guys that are crisis negotiating, also known as hostage negotiating. So basically, when you have a standoff, I'll just pick an example, like a standoff with a subject inside of a house where they're maybe armed and barricaded, and you're the guy that gets on the phone with them.
Yeah,
or
you
gal.
do that?
I've done it many times. Yeah.
What's the key to get them to?
Well, really not problem solving, meaning your job is really not to get on there and go, it's time for you to come out. Although that's one of the things that you want to say.
Yeah.
That because otherwise you might get some guy that comes out hours and hours later that goes, and then you're like, why didn't you just come out? And it's like, well, you never asked me. Believe me, that's happened. But
if you would have just said something.
But really what it is it's just listening to people and letting them vent. And it's really
kind of being their friend.
Yeah. I mean, really it's building rapport with people. And you got to remember that the people that you're dealing with in those situations, anytime a SWAT team, I call it SWAT, but basically it's the Special Operations Team is what they call it here in Tulsa. But anytime somebody is dealing with the SWAT team in a situation like that, what I used to say is when the police, we are who you call when the police need the police.
Okay.
So
when the police need the police.
Yeah. And those are the really tense situations when life and death, it could be life and death, especially for them.
Right.
And so you try to listen to them, and hopefully if you can get them to talk to you, then usually you're about 90+% successful in getting them to come out safely.
So you specialize in that?
I did for 10 and a half years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, for 10 and a half years. But, I still assist with the teaching every now and then. And when they had like a COVID situation on the team, back when COVID was running rampant, actually I was one of the people that, they called up and said, hey, can you fill in? And we actually got called in to in the event that we were going to negotiate with somebody because we did not have COVID. But, we know how to do it. We know how to do that.
What was COVID like being a police officer?
It was different. I can remember that that first April, we all were working from home because, none of us knew what in the heck to do.
Yeah.
We didn't want to be exposed to this more than anybody else. We were working from home, and believe it or not, for our homicide unit, it was one of the busiest Aprils we've ever had in our homicide unit for murders. Yeah.
I wonder why.
I think people were just going a little bit.
People were
it was
inside
intense.
too long together.
It was intense. Yeah. It was intense. But I think if I'm not mistaken, I want to say that we had close to 14 murders that month.
Wow.
10 to 14. It was something like that. It was a lot for April. But I've been very blessed in my career. I've gotten to do a lot of different things from being undercover. Well, everybody works the streets. Everybody starts in a police car. And then most generally, everybody works in a police car for 3 years before they're even eligible for a specialty unit.
What do you think the hardest thing about being an officer nowadays is? The discrimination you guys get for no reason, it seems like sometimes.
Well, since from being on TV, I have to say this, that from being on TV, it's been 99.9% positive. So in some of the purple areas where crime is, there's more crime than any other parts of the city, they watch it. They watch us on TV more often in those parts of the city than other places. Okay,
Really?
so yeah, so we're readily recognizable when we show up on murders and stuff in some of these parts of the city, more so than in others, maybe. Okay, so what I'm getting at is that it's like almost we get a pass. The people that have grown up to hate the police,
Yeah.
in many instances, it's like, I still hate the cops, but you guys are cool.
You're a celebrity.
Or, you know, we realize that you guys work just as hard for anybody. You work just as hard no matter what the socioeconomic background is of this person or that person. They see it. They see it on TV that we really care. And I think that's one of the benefits of that show. I'll tell you a quick story.
Tell me.
This is, if anybody ever wonders why in the world would you want to have a show about murder as part of the travel brochure, so to speak. And there was an instance where there was a family that showed up in our lobby. And then that happens. You get people that show up there sometimes just to meet us. And sometimes people will travel here to meet us,
Really?
honestly, from time to time. And in this particular situation, there was a guy, he was probably in his 50s, mid 50s, his wife, and then they brought their 18-year-old daughter up there. And he had been talking to one of my supervisors briefly, kind of telling them why they were up there. And then my supervisor came and got me, and he goes, hey, you probably should come out there and talk to these people because it sounds like there's something to this and this might be a murder. And so I went out there, and when I walked out to the lobby, they were like, oh, hey, good to meet you. You know, love it. We love you and all this stuff. And it makes you feel good, you know? So I was like, oh, that's great. You know, how you doing? And et cetera. And he goes, hey, listen, I got to tell you this. He goes, I have been raised to hate the police my whole life. I've spent over half of my life in prison. And I have to tell you that we absolutely appreciate the fact that you guys treat everybody right. You're not yelling at people.
Yeah.
You respect people. And he goes, the reason why I'm here is because my daughter witnessed a murder yesterday. It didn't happen in Tulsa. She doesn't remember where it happened. It's somewhere in northeast Oklahoma. But she witnessed a murder. As a matter of fact, not only did she witness the murder, but she drove the killer both to there and then from there. And we brought her up here. And the reason why we brought her up here to you guys is because we trust you. And so I thought, I mean, you know, can you get a more better compliment than that? And so I said, well, would you mind if I took her back there and I interviewed her? And he goes, nope, she's all yours. Just bring her home when you're done. And so I took her back there and I interviewed her, and she told us the whole story. And not only that, but she took us to where the killer was at. So, Of course, we had cops there.
Yeah.
And then we found an area where some clothes had been burned up that he had been wearing at the time of the murder. And then I put her in the car, and we started looking for where in the heck this happened.
Yeah.
And then finally I thought, well, I'll just call the medical examiner's office and see if they have a murder that sounds similar to that. And sure enough, they did in Miami, Oklahoma. And so I called them up. I said, hey, do you guys have anything in reference to that case? And they said, we have nothing. And I said, well, I've got your star witness with me, and we're on our way. And so we helped solve that case. She's the hero, but we'll take a little bit of credit.
No, you got to take the credit.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool.
Give me a story. What's the first 48? I mean, what is there a story on there, a case on there that just it just really affected you, made you think about?
You know, there's been a few of the cases where I've actually known the suspects,
Really?
and a couple of them for sure. One of them was a kid that was, to tell you the truth, I almost shot this kid back in when he was a middle school student. And that's when I was a school resource officer. And he came
An SRO.
I was. He came at me with a butcher knife. And there's more to that story, but he ended up killing somebody. And I happened to be up for the next murder. And so that paid real dividends, the fact that I knew him.
And it was on TV?
It's on TV. That's one of them. Of course, the Courtney Palmer case, that case gets talked about both positive, both good and bad. You know, there's people that are furious that, you know, we didn't stick them on a plane or lock them up or something. That case, you know, is one of those that sticks with me because I liked him, I knew him, and he tragically got murdered. You know, you got to remember that in our world, sometimes we deal with the same people.
That is so
over
weird.
and over. I'm like the case I've got right now.
The one you got today?
Yeah, I've dealt with those people within the year. Yeah, so I already know the people. I already knew them before that anyway. But I from just life as a cop. but I'm dealing with a lot of the same characters that were, involved in that. So that's just kind of the way it works.
So will you retire doing this?
Well, I'll tell you a fun fact is that, and my boss had calculated all the murders and stuff, and he was able to tally up the numbers back to, I think, to 1963. We have many more murders nowadays than we did back in the 50s, 40s, and all that stuff. They didn't have near the numbers that we have today. Matter of fact, when I got on the police department, I think we roughly had, I remember having numbers like 30 to 40 a year. Now we're having like 60 to 70 a year, sometimes 80 something. So it's
crazy.
many more today. But to answer your question, just to kind of tell you, so they tallied up the statistics and stuff, and I'm number 3 all time as far as the amount
Solving cases?
No, as far as being the lead detective. So there's only 3 of us that have been assigned as the lead detective on murders, that are over 100, and today I'm at 113.
Wow.
So, and one of them is retired. So eventually I will make it to number 2, and then I'm second in seniority, the guy that's been in there.
Now you have to be number 1.
Maybe, you never know. You never know. I would like that if honestly, if I could just pick the cases that I got, and if I could pick and choose and just teach, which I do a lot of in all over there, doing not just outside of the state. I teach a lot here locally too. Like tonight I'll be teaching the Citizens Police Academy. But which, by the way, we need to get you signed up for that. We need to have you do
You
that.
do not want me to be a cop.
No, that would be perfect. Literally, it's like 13 weeks every Tuesday night for 13 weeks. You would love it. Yeah,
Really?
it's great, and it's free.
And so you could be a police officer?
No, but you can go through the training to get a better idea as to what our job entails.
Yeah, which I think everyone needs to do.
It's good. We have citizens like tonight. There's probably 30 citizens from the city. We do it twice a year. It's a great program. It gives the general citizen a better understanding as to what it is that we do.
I love that.
So like one of the weeks you actually get to ride in the car where they're doing pursuit training.
A ride along?
Well, but it's on the pursuit track.
Okay.
So they're pursuing another police officer
Yeah.
out on our track. Oh, it's great. That's one of the funnest things you'll ever do.
That is awesome.
They let you shoot guns at part of it, and they do a block over undercover stuff, homicide. I do 2 nights. I do homicide investigations, and I show the real deal. I've
seen
real
you
cases.
talk before, and
Well,
you do show it.
Like that. It's going to be that, but then even more. It's 3 hours of a lot of different cases.
Didn't you used to work in L.A.?
No, but I grew up in L.A. I grew up about 5 miles away from Sharon Tate's house, one of the locations that I lived.
Okay.
From the Manson murders, and that was
Didn't
in
you say something about O.J.? Have I heard you tell an O.J. story before?
Well, what you're thinking of is that when I was a kid, I grew up near the Manson murders where those took place.
Okay.
The Hillside Stranglers were running around Los Angeles when I lived there. That's when I decided I wanted to be a homicide detective at like 6, which is completely not normal.
No.
And then from there, there was when I was working in the medical field, there was a few different incidents that made me really get motivated to get back and chase after my dream, because I was entrenched in the medical field. I'd worked in that for 10 years, and those cases were OJ, Waco. Because when Waco happened, I wanted to be a crisis negotiator. I remember going, I want to do that, and I want to be a crisis negotiator. And what's fun about that is I actually know the lead negotiator from Waco now. He's a friend of mine. And then from there, then the Oklahoma City bombing happened, and if you lived there, which I did, and
you lived there during the Oklahoma City bombing?
I heard it.
Were you in medical?
I worked in surgery. I was in a revision total hip surgery when that happened, and I remember hearing it. We all did.
You heard it?
Oh yeah.
Wow. So you were working in the medical field, not even in...
I was in a surgery when I was a scrub tech in a revision total hip surgery, and we heard
you were
the
in a
blast.
hospital?
Uh-huh.
Did people come to the hospital? I mean, because...
No, because most of them died. So there was a very small number of people that ended up going to the very close hospitals. We were probably 6 miles away, but we didn't get any survivors that came to our hospital. So
how can people watch your podcast? This sounds interesting to me. What's it about?
Well, and by the way, it's probably what you're. By the way, I think this is great that you're doing this. you're a natural. I heard you say on another one of your podcasts that you're really nervous doing this.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, because you're a natural.
Thank you.
But I was a little nervous myself. It's on KGRA.
Okay.
Digital Broadcasting, and it's called. You can catch it on Spotify, Apple, Rumble. You can go straight to KGRA. You can go to follow me on Detective Jason White on my Facebook page, and I post my episodes each week. I'm starting back November the 1st. I've been on a little hiatus, right? But it's called Into the Fire, True Crime Stories. And really what the premise of the show is I like to bring people on there that are movers and shakers in the world of criminal justice. People that are moving mountains, and they're just extraordinary people. I'll tell you, like one of my guests is one of Ted Bundy's victims that actually was one of the survivors from the Chi Omega sorority house. And of course,
what?
Yeah, she's one of my guests. And
How did you get that?
I don't take no easily. Sometimes I know people, and she actually originally turned me down, but she's a sweetie. She's a friend of mine now. Now we're buddies.
So what's her story? I'm so curious.
She was asleep in the Chi Omega sorority house in Tallahassee, Florida, and that's when Ted Bundy came in, and he actually he had murdered 2 of the 4 girls. 4 of them were attacked, and she was one of the survivors. And the other 2, there was other 2 girls that were her sorority sisters that tragically were murdered. They were beaten to death. That's insane. But she didn't really see his face. She saw the figure of him standing there, and then he started beating her to death and broke her jaw. And just she's very lucky to be alive. But she's one of my guests, and I she's just a story of survival.
How interesting.
How inspirational. And then I have Gil Carrillo, who's another buddy of mine, and he was the lead detective for the Night Stalker case. Richard
Which
Ramirez.
is on Netflix, I think.
Yeah. No, he's on there. He's a buddy of mine. Yeah, he's a friend of mine.
Oh, that's great.
That's one of the advantages of kind of being a little bit recognizable is that you kind of
get recognized? I was curious.
Yeah.
Every day?
It depends upon where I'm at.
Yeah.
Like in Virginia, you will by the participants going because they're cops, but sometimes it just depends. Yeah, it depends.
What's your favorite thing you're doing right now? Copping, or is it podcasting?
Well, I think I probably share a little bit. I've had 29 episodes on the show. We took a little bit of a break.
That's got to be more than anybody. I feel like you're on every episode.
Well, I'm talking about just podcast.
Oh.
As far as if you're talking about First 48, I think I've been on 86 episodes or something like that, yeah. But
have you noticed sorry.
No.
Have you noticed the Tulsa podcast? They do like that, or not podcast, the Tulsa First 48. They do an hour of the case a lot of times rather than, a lot of times they go to 2 different cities.
Yeah. A lot of people don't like the splits.
Yeah.
It's a split in the episode. And I know a lot of the detectives from other cities, as a matter of fact.
Mobile, Alabama.
I just actually hung out with a Mobile detective that just by chance, he happened to be in Virginia. And we hung out he was watching me speak. And
so
not
do
just
all the detectives on these shows, do they do what you do?
No.
No. You've kind of capitalized on it.
Well, I always wanted to do a podcast. I thought it would be funny. I thought it would be fun. And myself and Ronnie, before this show, before the First 48, we'd talk about it in the car going, hey, that would be cool. We should do something like that. And this is kind of at the infancy of podcasts, right? And then I did a show on KGRA with some other cops, and they had me on as a guest. And I've been on a lot of podcasts. I mean, a ton of them. Yours included, which is one of my favorites from the early days of Cash Radio.
Yeah.
But it was I think I was episode number 13 with you. That still is one of my favorite episodes because it was fun.
It was. We actually went to the homicide. Do you call that a homicide unit?
Yeah, you came up there and we did it in an actual.
I need to take a visit there again.
In an actual interview room.
Yes.
Yeah.
I need to get new podcasting equipment, and I'm coming back there.
Yeah. Yep. So, but anyway, that's kind of how it all started, and I was
Ronnie,
on. He was, but he recently left. We were going to revisit it after 6 months, and when we talked, he'd just gotten a job. He left the department permanently this time. He's done, and he went and he's going to work in another part of the state. He's working down in Muskogee, and it just became a little bit more difficult and stuff. So he decided to bow out. He didn't get fired, but he quit, one of those deals. He just said, "Hey, listen, I just can't do it for right now." So I started missing it, and
I thought you were gonna say missing him.
well, I miss him from time to time. Yeah, of course. He was kind of like,
Shout out to Ronnie Love.
yeah, he was my little buddy and my wingman.
So was that your bestie on the show? Would you say?
He was the guy that I ran around with most often in the unit, as far as when we would have murders.
Yeah.
You know, and he and I just happened to get along. And
Who was the bow tie guy?
that was Matt Frazier.
Yes.
Yeah.
He quit too, didn't he?
He did. He's a sales rep for a medical implant company. Yeah.
And then there's Mark.
Mark is still
Wow,
around.
I am a fan.
Mark is still around.
Loyal.
Yeah. Yeah, you know these
I'm
names.
loyal to the first 48.
Yeah, he's still around. He's the guy that's had the most seniority, and I'm number 2.
Okay, so how can we watch your podcast? You said KG.
It's KGRA,
Okay.
Digital Broadcasting.
All right.
You can either follow me on Facebook, Detective Jason White, or you can go to Spotify, Rumble, Apple, you name the streaming thing, and you can find it. And then, and it's the station's actually out of Utah.
Okay.
It's out of Utah, but it's
So all the streaming platforms.
all of them.
Yeah.
And we get people. We have a viewership that's probably 1,500 to 2,000 a week.
Nice.
Which is good. That's
Yeah.
good for a new podcast.
I'm lucky to have my mom and dad watch it. So
I think it's more than that, but we have about that, and we have people that watch from throughout the world.
yeah,
So
well, you're
we have
Detective
viewers
Jason
from
White.
we have people from Australia, from Europe, all over the world that watch, and they're loyal too. I mean, I'm sure you have your loyal people, but you have that crew
Yeah.
of people that are there every Friday night. It's on Friday nights. I do it live.
Oh, you do it live?
I do it live from 7 p.m. to 7:54 p.m.
Wow.
And I have a producer that throws my things up there, like
Yeah.
websites and stuff like that, or pictures of my guests, or any pictures that I want thrown up there. She does all that, and she lives in Nova Scotia, Canada. Yeah, that's where she's out of.
That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. The main director is out of New York State. So there's
Well, I'm
people
proud
from.
of you.
Thank you.
You're doing big things, man.
Well, it's fun.
Yeah.
And here's the thing for me, I don't make any money on it, although I'm not opposed to making money. So if you want to advertise, give me a shout. But
Right.
I'm not opposed.
Same.
But it's not all about the money, and sometimes it's
This
about
is fun.
It is. It is fun. And for instance, my guest coming up November the 1st is Jason Schechterly, who actually he was on the first 48 back in the day.
Okay.
From Phoenix, and he actually got into a very horrific car accident. He got hit by a taxi driver that ran into his police car going about 100 miles an hour. He'd had a seizure and ran into the back of his police car, and the car burst in flames.
Wow.
And just by chance, there happened to be a fire engine right there at that intersection at that very moment, but he still got burned almost 50% of his body, and terribly.
Probably got a great story.
Oh, it's I worked in a burn center for 6 years, so I had messaged him many years ago just to tell him how inspired I was and how proud I was that I had worked in a burn center, and I know how difficult that is for him. And so I had communicated with him years and years ago, but I reached out to him, and I didn't know that he would actually do it, but he did. And so I'm super excited. He'll be on this Friday, and it'll be great. But
Jason, I think you're awesome.
And likewise.
I've always been a fan of yours. So at First 48, where can we watch it now? I mean,
it's still on Thursday nights.
I always watch on what night?
It's always Thursday nights.
It's always Thursday night. So
Always.
I always
Well,
watch
it's on
it
all
on
the time,
Prime.
really. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've bought all the. I like it. I've bought all the episodes on Prime Video. So
it's not just the regular First 48, but there's also After the First 48.
Yes.
Which I actually like those a little better. The production is a little bit more expensive, and it just looks better.
And they interview more.
They do.
Yeah.
And I want to hear the perspective from the jurors
Yeah.
and the judges sometimes, and sometimes the defense attorneys to a point.
Are you fans of defense attorneys?
Yeah, there's some. You know what? Believe it or not, there's a lot of them I actually like.
Yeah.
There's some of them that I don't, but
I don't know how they do what they do.
they know who they are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
No shout outs you want to give?
no, I mean, actually, for the most part, we're really fortunate here in the city of Tulsa that there is a mutual respect and we're not playing. There's not any real games that are going shenanigans and all that jazz.
Yeah.
You know, so we have a job to do. They have a job to do, and I'm just a very lucky guy to be able to do my childhood dream job. You know, how cool
I feel
is
like
that?
you're doing many jobs right now.
Well, you know, my hobby. You know, my wife, she gets irritated with the fact. Hi, Tina.
What's up, Tina? Thanks for letting your husband come on.
Tina at times gets a little bit. She doesn't really like the Friday night podcast thing so much, but it's just the time they gave me, and we'll shoot for Friday for right now. And I want to continue to get my experience and learn this industry a little bit, to where maybe one day I could go out on my own.
Just be yourself.
Yeah. And in this case, I'm gonna be going solo here for a while, but I've also thought that I might bring past guests on to be like a co-host here and there. You know, kind of a deal. Just
Are you buddies with Styx?
I know him. I know Sean. I've known him for
Sean.
Yeah, I've known Sean for 25 plus
Is he
years.
still doing stuff with
Actually, I think
TV or anything?
Actually, I think he's winding down from that show. I think you know, that's got to be. I mean, I wouldn't mind it for a while. I mean, I think it would be incredibly difficult to do that job while you're working here, especially in my job.
Because he was a police officer as well, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, he was the sergeant for the gangs unit.
Yes.
And he had done that for a long, long time. I think that as a supervisor in his position, you could probably, and not to speak out of turn, but I think it would be easier for him to disappear, meaning to fly to New York. What he was doing is he was flying to New York for the weekends, every weekend. And then flying back. And, you know, if you fly much, and I fly a fraction of what he did, and it's, man, that wears on you. Yeah. You know, it really can wear on you. But, you know, he doesn't need to do that anymore. I mean, he exploded. He's very popular throughout the
He dated Lana Del Rey.
I met her actually.
You met her?
I ran into the both of them when I was walking into Mathis Brothers, and I was like, "Hey, Sean, what's up?" And he introduced me. I didn't know who she was, to tell you the truth. I mean,
Are you kidding me?
No, I didn't know. She goes, "This is Lana, my girlfriend," and I was like, "Oh, okay, hey." And I didn't even know that she was a big deal. You know, I mean, how stupid am I? I didn't know.
I think that's great, though.
Yeah. But I had no clue that's
hilarious.
Yeah.
They're not together anymore, so that's okay.
But I know, but and that's been cool. I mean, you know, some of the people that I've been able to meet since being on there and stuff. I mean, there was a guy that I work with and stuff. He's a massive Toronto Blue Jays fan. No, I'm sorry, Toronto Maple Leafs, the NHL team.
Oh yeah,
right. And so we were sitting watching a semi-pro, you know, the Tulsa Oilers. We were watching them. And
football team.
No, well, this one's the hockey one. Yeah.
Okay.
So we were sitting there watching a hockey game, and he was telling me about how much of a super fan he was of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I was like, well, you know, I've got a former Toronto Maple Leaf on Twitter, and I messaged him and I said, you know this guy, right? And he's like, yeah, I know him. And I'm like, well, here, let me message him real quick. And I messaged him, and he messaged me back. And I was like,
that's great.
Yeah, hey, look, he's sporting your hat, and he was like, rock on, man, that's awesome.
Yeah,
but,
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
You're great. Thank you for being on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
BSing with me.
Thank you.
Thank you for the cup.
Listen, it is my pleasure. I know that you'll cherish that.
Oh, I'm going to be drinking coffee.
Good.
Just solving murders on my own, you know?
Listen, watch her podcast and watch mine.
Yeah. Watch yours.
That's
Detective
right.
Jason White, thanks for being on, my boy.
Thank you, my friend.